there's always a sense of maybe there's something I don't know, or maybe something has happened. Not try to reduce it down to a single AI good, AI bad, AI fake, AI dangerous.
Welcome back to another episode on the UX On Minds podcast, and here today we're wrapping up workshop number 1 with the awesome Caleb Sponheim. In this first workshop series, we've been looking at AI and how to use AI in your work. So in parts 1 and 2, we've been looking at dealing with the pressure to adopt AI and also just where AI is at currently in the world of UX. And in this final part, we're going to look at how to keep up with AI, because it seems like there's a lot of development and changes in AI, and sometimes you feel like maybe you're getting left behind, and maybe you need to keep up with all of these changes and implement it in all of your different work processes. But in this final part, we're going to look at actually how quickly is AI developing and how can you keep up with it, and maybe it's not moving as fast as maybe you once thought. So let's delve into this final part number 3 of how to keep up with AI in this final episode of workshop number 1. So let's take it away with Caleb Sponheim.
Really happy to introduce part 3 to our first workshop series with Caleb Sponheim. So it's nice to have you back on. And it's a while since actually we recorded the first 2 parts. And finally we got around to part 3. So I'm sure our listeners or watchers will be happy that we're finally releasing part 3. Cool.
Well, I'm really happy to be here. I'm really excited to dig into part 3.
Parts 1 and parts 2 kind of, whet our appetite for the topic of part 3, which is how to keep up with the AI world. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this one with you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, one of the biggest feelings that people I talk to have about AI is a feeling that they're behind in some way, that they always need to catch up.
Yeah.
And I feel as though no matter how advanced you are or how long you've been using AI or how plugged in you are, there's always a sense of maybe there's something I don't know, or maybe something has happened that I should know about, but I don't. Yeah. And especially with AI, on top of that, there's a fear of missing out bit as well, where it's like, more than just, maybe there's some information that I would benefit from, but am I missing out on something amazing that everyone else is using or other people are able to use? I think that's linked to the issue that I think we might have touched on in part 1, which is that AI is a technology that's easy to imagine it being better than it really is.
Yeah.
It's very easy to especially if you don't have a ton of experience with it, just imagine I must not be using it right because I'm seeing people talk about that it can do anything, or we're going to be at artificial general intelligence very, very soon, or it's easy to kind of project ahead into the future and think like, maybe there's some of that stuff now that I don't know about.
Yeah.
So there's kind of the two tasks or the two challenges here. One is, how do I sift through the hype? How do I know what's actually real and what's not? And then also, how do I stay plugged in to the news cycle just enough to catch when something interesting and valuable shows up?
Yeah.
Right? And so I like to recommend 2 things that people do. It's little experiments and a news diet. Now I don't recommend diets in any other context except for this one, because and by diet I mean I'm assuming that anyone who's feeling overwhelmed by AI news or feeling like they're unplugged maybe are subscribing to too many things or trying to ingest too much information all at once and getting overwhelmed. That's my job to be overwhelmed, to subscribe to too many daily newsletters and have to sift through all of them in like the email inbox is the worst it's ever been for me. Setting that aside,
Had to set up a specific inbox, I imagine, for
something. That's a great idea. I should get it right. I should really do that. I'll cover the little experiments first. So what I mean by that is there are going to be many instances in a professional's work where AI is currently not useful, or maybe you've done the difficult work of kind of learning some prompt engineering skills, learning how to use a particular tool, and then integrating it into your workflow and realizing like, it doesn't accelerate my work in the way I want, or it doesn't do the things that I expect. That's perfectly fine. I think there's still value in every once in a while seeing if you can use AI in a task that you haven't in a while. Just kind of check in with the tools, because these tools change all the time. They update. A lot of them keep the same names, but they change the back end, or they change their functionality or their capabilities. And so even if it might not be objectively useful or objectively beneficial to kind of like spend some time with AI, I think it's useful for just keeping up to date and kind of keeping tabs on not just updating your own skills, but also, hey, what can the models do right now? What can the tools do? So for example, it's very useful to think about AI as kind of a coworker right now. You can't really leave it to do anything by itself.
Yeah.
At least right now, as of December 2024. And an example of where you might do a little experiment is, say you're building a slide deck, right? You're creating some sort of deliverable, and you might already be using AI routinely to plan out your deck. Maybe turning a bunch of notes or data into kind of an outline of a presentation.
Yeah.
Maybe this time you take that outline and you give it to Microsoft Copilot inside PowerPoint and say, hey, can you make a slide deck based off of this document? And just check to see like, hey, can it make a good deck now? Is it good
What
enough?
results am I going to get this time?
Right. Like, is it going to be good enough for me to, and maybe it will and maybe it won't.
Yeah.
And that's just an example of like, okay, I'm going to, spend maybe 5 minutes just poking at this tool and then go back to my normal work. So those little experiments can not only help you get in the habit of testing these new tools and trying new avenues, but it'll also help you keep up to date with when things update, when you it's not going to yell at you that it's been updated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's something that I've probably been doing without realizing I'm doing it, these kind of little tests, because since AI has been introduced so kind of widespread in terms of tools that we can use for our work. If I think back to when I first started using these AI tools, there has been a big difference in kind of the output they give, or the sophistication of how it like gives you this output of data. Just to ask you a question on that as well, is there a way that you use to kind of track those changes? Because I'm just at the moment going off memory, like, oh yeah, this looks like it's improved, but I've got no kind of ways to check if it has improved or if it's just, don't know, bias of me using it now, if you get what I mean.
So I will admit that I'm a bit of a unique use case, because I am in the role of keeping track of where things are useful enough to recommend to people. So when I've evaluated something and I think that, this is good enough to use, there's kind of two places where I update things. So NNG has a database of AI tools that we keep internally that we kind of keep track of. And we say, we've heard about this thing, let's poke at it. And we'll return to that list every once in a while. It's not a systematic, we don't go through every 100 tools every month or something. But for example, there's a category of AI tools for note-taking, right? AI tools that sit next to you in a meeting and maybe record a little audio or transcribe audio and take notes for you and kind of deliver it afterwards, right? Sure. There's lots of these types of tools. Yeah. Many of them I've realized, many of them were not good enough to recommend or use, but recently there are some tools that have come into focus that are good enough to use. Yes. And so we wouldn't have been able to know whether that tool is good enough if we weren't kind of saying like, all right, let's give this a shot. Let's give this a shot. And so we put it into our spreadsheet. The other place that I update things is honestly in the course that I teach's slide deck, right? So I have portions of my course where we talk about, hey, this area of research tasks, they're not good enough. AI isn't good enough to kind of be integrated into here, right? So an example of this was qualitative data clustering. For a long time, AI wasn't good enough to cluster collections of data together to make sense very well. Large language models weren't anyway. But over the course of the summer, these tools were updated and were improved to the point where we could recommend them. And so we changed the course to reflect that. I think for people personally, it is okay to be casual about it. I actually don't think you need to be really structured about this check-in. I want it to be low effort. It can just be, right, like I said, little experiments. Let me just try using it again, once a month or once a week. Let me just like pop over to Claude or pop over to Adobe Illustrator or something, right? Whatever tool kind of is close at hand, let me just try it. If it doesn't work, that's fine. Set it aside and move forward with your day. Because at the end of the day, people who are doing real work, sure, something can be interesting or unique or cool, but is it useful?
Yeah.
That's what we care about. And so I don't want people wasting their time collecting spreadsheets of AI tools that are bad.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, because that way, like you said, you're there. It's meant to help you. It's meant to be useful. So if you're collecting a database of bad AI tools and revisiting those, then what's the point? It's focus on the ones that already have made good progress. I imagine this is just what I'm getting from you, and then focus on those because potentially those are the ones that are going to be more useful in the more near future.
Yes, and crucially, I think the little experiments bit pairs well with the news diet bit, because ideally, if you subscribe to kind of the right sources of information, you will be told when some tools are worth trying out.
Yeah.
Or when something has been updated enough to maybe like give a shot, right? So what I mean by news diet is it's very easy to subscribe to too many email newsletters. I think we've all had that problem, right? And so what I recommend is one newsletter for just news and information, right? Okay. And I don't think it should be daily. I think you can get away with a weekly newsletter, either about tech generally or artificial intelligence.
Okay.
If you can find a monthly one, that's okay too. I am of the opinion, and I know this might be a little bit controversial, but I don't think the AI industry meaningfully improves so fast that you need a weekly newsletter to stay on top of things.
Yeah, I think I would agree with
for the typical professional doing real quality work.
Yeah.
You don't need the AI isn't going to revolutionize your workflow every week. Not even every month. But maybe once a month there's like some sort of development that you want to be appraised of, but that's That's what I would say. You don't need to go daily. You could do weekly, and if you can find a monthly one, that's great.
Yeah.
I also recommend subscribing to 2 other sources of, honestly, opinion. So I recommend people find an optimistic voice about AI, someone who's writing about potentially new discoveries or kind of forward-thinking projections or unique use cases for existing technologies, someone who's excited about the future of AI.
Yeah.
I also recommend that people subscribe to someone writing from a skeptical point of view about artificial intelligence, about the current misuses of the technology, about the costs associated with them, about the challenges ahead for improving this technology, and by maintaining a balance of those perspectives, and that can mean different things for different people.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's really, really important, because AI is so complicated, to kind of have those 2 sides, optimism and skepticism, along with some source of news information.
Yeah.
So that's what I recommend by a news diet, right? Three newsletters, and one from pure information, one a skeptical point of view, and one an optimistic point of view. And that, paired with your little experiments that you're doing, is more than enough to be aware of things and know how to potentially try them and integrate them when something good enough might come along.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really good advice, especially the last part about balancing the news that you read around AI, because sometimes I find myself, I follow various people, voices in the field who speak about AI a lot. And sometimes it can be hard from my personal opinion, because sometimes you read something that's positive about AI and you start to think, oh yeah, no, that's true. And that's actually quite true. I'd maybe like to use it in some way, or depending on what they're talking about. Then you read something negative or skeptical about it, and then you feel almost guilty that that you read that positive news and felt positive towards AI. I don't know if it's just me, or if other people feel it big. So it's sometimes hard, I think, from my personal experience too, because there is sometimes in the field, especially within UX, there is a lot of skepticism around how much it's going to invade in our work, and is it going to take our job? So sometimes if you do read something positive and you think, no, that's actually could be useful, then I don't know, you're almost guilt tripped into feeling that you're against these ones who are skeptical, or who feel that, that it's going to tarnish UX, or it's going to water it down, etc. So, like, what's your opinion on that? How would you, if you do have if someone does have those feelings like me, like, how do you balance that between not being one way, or, well, obviously maybe someone does have a strong opinion, they are just completely against it, and that's fine. But if someone does want to remain in the middle and just kind of move with the advancement of AI and kind of see for themselves how it does advance, what are your opinions around balancing that?
So I hear you. I think it's very easy to feel like a ping pong ball being batted around on either side of, you can call it a debate, sure.
Yeah.
My personal experience of reading a lot of tech criticism, I consider myself a general AI skeptic. That's kind of my origin point coming into the field. Paired with optimistic writing and kind of excitement about it, is that they're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
No.
So if you're subscribing to high quality kind of optimistic writing about AI, they're not lying about AI capabilities, and they're not necessarily lying about their opinions about the future necessarily. They're just spending more time talking about using the tools, maybe exploring more about potential applications, maybe being a bit optimistic about the return on investments, maybe kind of thinking like, maybe more people could, find use of these tools than other folks. That's all well and good. The optimistic voices that I like to subscribe to are excited about even the incremental improvements of these tools on lots of different benchmarks. Testing these tools to see, are they a little bit better at reasoning? Are they a little bit better at answering complex questions or problems or challenges, right? Those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive from skeptical voices that are calling out the massive costs associated with using these pieces of technology. And this is a tough tightrope to walk, find myself as an individual actor, find that it is worthwhile and impactful for me to use AI in my work, while I also want to advocate for systemic change within the technology and AI industry. Just a couple days ago, for example, Meta announced that they're constructing the country's largest data center outside of New Orleans in Louisiana, which will be powered solely off of methane.
Oh, wow.
Right. Of course, they've made commitments to nuclear energy, which will be over the course of decades to develop.
Of course.
And I don't want that to happen, right? That personally, for my views, that's a potentially, catastrophic contribution to, climate change, right? Yeah. And so I want to advocate for structural changes that will actually kind of keep the AI industry in line. I can think those things, and I can also say, hey, based on what these tools cost me per month, based on what I know about energy and water use, it is worth it for me to use these tools in my work.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's a really, really complex and complicated series of decisions about using AI. And the way to move forward as a person is to engage with that complexity, not try to reduce it down to a single AI good, AI bad, AI fake, AI dangerous.
Yeah, I think that simplifies it too much. And it's something that I think each person obviously needs to, it's a decision everyone needs to make. And I think for the good of the field, specifically UX, we should refrain from judging other people if they feel that they want to use it to a certain degree or a certain level within their workflow. Then that's their personal decision, like you mentioned now with this huge data farm or whatever that's being created or constructed by Meta. Obviously, that comes into some ethical reasonings there for like yourself, why you might not want to, or you might not be happy about that, and you might refrain from using certain tools that Meta produce, as an example. And that's not for me to judge, and vice versa. And I think that removes also the potential feeling of the ping pong ball that you're getting bounced from one side to another, because you've got this inner battle. Maybe I'm just too emotional, but you've got this inner battle between can I agree with that, or am I going to get called out later on in a public setting for agreeing with that opinion or that article or that way to think? And I think that creates potentially I don't like to use the word too often, but a toxic environment within the UX industry, which potentially could snowball into with AI.
Yeah, I think it is easy to worry what other people think of us, right? It's easy to be concerned about being confronted about one's views or opinions, right? And a great way to increase one's confidence that in that potential confrontation, that hypothetical future, right, is not to take arguments wholeheartedly.
Exactly.
Right? You can be presented with pieces of information and evaluate them for your own self and see what resonates. See what sources and information they're citing. Look into the data behind that. We can engage with skeptical and optimistic sources of information and opinion around AI, and we can take what we want and leave what we don't to create a sense of a collection of our own opinions and perspectives that we feel confident in. We don't have to defend other people's point of views, but we should be able to feel confident in our own.
Yeah, and I think that's the key to to the question I asked previously. So yeah, being confident with how you feel about things, and I think that the key to all of that was based on what you mentioned before around not taking to heart and taking it as a personal attack or an attack on your ability if you do agree with a certain idea around AI.
Yeah, I agree. So all of that is to say, to keep up with things, to kind of to feel like you're not behind, really doesn't take that much.
No.
All you have to do is, use these tools every once in a while to see if they're good enough, right? Up to snuff. And engage with a couple of sources of information, maintain that perspective of opinions, and you're good to go.
Excellent. I like that toolkit of how to keep pace in a balanced way with what seems like a fast-paced movement at the moment, AI, and
seems like it,
but tying it back into what you mentioned at the beginning, that it's fast-paced to an extent, I suppose, compared to 1 or 2 years ago. There's been a lot of changes, but all of those changes that we're seeing, from my point of view, have been in the background for a long time, and it's only coming out now because obviously it's ready to kind of be released to the wider world. So from our point of view, it's very quick and it's very sudden, but I imagine there's been a lot of work that's gone into AI and these tools, etc., for a long time, and maybe now we're expecting it to move at that speed. So we just subconsciously go to look for these changes and look for new tools, when in reality, like you mentioned, the pace of these changes are probably not as relevant as we feel to introduce into our work. And maybe once or twice a year, there might be something that we can start using and use confidently as well.
Yeah, you're right.
Cool. I got it. So the workshop worked.
It did, yeah. Oh, well, I'm really happy that we got to work together to kind of lay out some things that are hopefully helpful for people.
Absolutely. Like usually when I'm learning things, like I learn things in many different ways and formats, but I feel, well, I hope for our listeners especially, that this workshop has been a deep dive into the AI world, but in specific of how we can maintain, I would say, a mental clarity over what AI is, how we can introduce it into our workflow without feeling the pressure to do so, whilst maintaining this balance between what we listen to, how we digest that information, and what expectations we should put on ourselves, but also on the community of UX and also the AI community as well. So a big thank you.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem.